Age in 1930.
In 1930, I was 17.
Size of your family in the 1930s. Names of the persons in your household and their relationship to you.
I had two brothers and a sister. Of course, my sister would have been 19. My one brother would have been 10, and the other one 8, I believe. You're saying 1930?
No, in the 1930s.
Oh, in the 30s. Well, at 1930, I was 17, and my brothers would have been, as I said. But in the 30s, well, you go on from there, I guess, to determine the age. Is that the right answer, that I was 17 in 1930?
Well, the first question was, what was your age in 1930? And you said
Yes.
17.
Right.
Then the second question is, what was the size of your family in the 1930s?
Oh,
Who were in the household and their relationship to you?
Well, my father, my mother, my two brothers, and my sister. But we both, my sister and I both married in 1934. So we left home then, in 1934. Ella was married in August and I was married in November. And so after that, the size of the family would have been my two brothers and my father and my mother. And in 1934, one brother was 14 and the other brother was 12. Okay, does that answer the question?
Okay, what was your residence or residences in the 1930s with dates, streets, towns, and states?
Well, I was in Vermont all that time, and in the 1930s. And the first residence was 58 North Main Street. After Clarendon, after leaving home, my first residence was, no, I've got it wrong. My first residence was with my aunt at 16 Roy Street, after leaving home. And then the next one was when I married and lived at 58 North Main Street, and that was from 1934 to 1936. Then the winter of 1936 and 37, I lived in Shrewsbury, Vermont. And then it's hard to remember where we went next, but I think we were in Northfield, Vermont, where Lester was in the CCC camp from September of 1937, I think. 1937, yeah, he was up there, and we moved there in September, and we lived there until December, and then we spent that winter, the winter of 37, with my in-laws in Fairhaven, because the camp closed in Northfield, and so we went to Fairhaven, Massachusetts for the winter, and we lived there for the winter, and then we had word in the spring that a CCC camp, there was a CCC camp in Weston, Vermont. And so we went to Weston, Vermont and tried to find a place to live. And we lived there from 1938 until 1940. So that covers the 30s. And the 2 years we lived in Weston were very pleasant years, because we had friends there. The Ortons were our friends, and we could go back and forth with them and go to occasionally out of town to a movie. That I saw Gone with the Wind when we lived in Weston. That was when it came out. We went down to Rutland. It was a 4-hour movie, and it was really interesting. interesting.
Did the family own its own homes, rent? And if they rented, how much was the rent?
We paid $75 a month in Weston to, a lady boarded us the first winter, from 38 to 39. We boarded with, what is now the Vermont Country Store. And, the lady who was living there took us in to board, and she charged us $75 a month and fed us for that. And, when we lived on North Main Street, we paid $35 a month rent, and that included our heat and, lights and everything, except food, I guess. So, have I covered all the places we lived? Northfield, I don't remember what we paid for rent, but it was very minimal. We had an apartment that was terribly cold, and it got to be 16 below zero before we moved out of there. No heat in the upstairs bedroom, and I took Linda to bed with us, keep her warm. She was still wetting herself, so we'd have to have her well padded. She was only, what, a year old, something like that. A little over a year old.
Did the family have a telephone?
I don't think we did on North Main Street. We may have before we must have before Linda was born, but not when we first moved in there. We used our landlady's telephone, or somebody in the house. If we needed to use a phone, we used somebody else's, I guess. But, in Northfield, we didn't have a telephone, I'm sure. We must have used our landlord lived in the, other side of the house, and they would let us use the phone. We just lived on, meagerly. I mean, we're frugal. We had just so much money, and we couldn't have a lot of luxuries.
Electricity?
We had electricity everywhere we lived. I think I was married before my people in Clarendon had, close to my being married before they had electricity, which would have been 1934.
Electrical appliances?
Well, we had a toaster, gas stove in North Main Street, and in Weston, we had an oil stove, the kind that you use in the summertime, that people use in the summertime, what they called an oil stove. It was kerosene, I believe. That's what we used in Weston. We lived upstairs over another family.
Indoor plumbing and running water?
Well, let me think. Yes. We had indoor running water. My folks didn't have running water. They didn't have running water until many years later. They had to go and drink it. Well, they had a cistern with a pump, and they would, for washing or anything like that, they would pump the cistern water. But they had to, from one of the farms nearby, they carried the drinking water. Go and get a pail of drinking water, several times a day, maybe. She trying to talk to you?
What kind of cook stove was used?
Well, I spoke about the oil stove we used up in Weston, and we had a gas stove on North Main Street, and, well, I guess that's it. And of course, when I lived in Shrewsbury, we had the old kitchen range to cook on.
Which of those were acquired for the first time during the 1930s?
Was acquired for the first time. I don't know just what you mean. How did we get?
Telephone, electricity, electrical appliances, indoor, outdoor plumbing. Running indoor plumbing. Running water.
Well, that
stove.
was pretty much available in the 30s. Where in the places where I lived, we had indoor plumbing, and we had running water and refrigerators, that sort of thing.
Were you in school any time in the 30s?
I'm trying to think if I graduated from high school in 1930. And after that, I think I took a brief course at business school to try to sharpen my abilities with shorthand and typing. But no, I wasn't in school. I had a scholarship but never could use it, didn't use it. So,
How did the Depression affect the students in the family?
well, it affected us quite a bit because we didn't have very much money. And my mother made all our clothes when my brother's pants, shirt, and it affected us in getting an education because I wasn't able to go beyond high school. And my sister did get through Middlebury College, but she worked very hard to do that, waiting table and doing house duty and working summers, that kind of thing.
How did you or they finance education?
Well, my father helped us through high school, and he helped my sister her first year in college. And of course, it didn't cost as much then, but it caused quite a strain because my father didn't have any money very much to help the rest of us.
Did elementary and high school students have to buy their own books, or did the school provide them?
Elementary were provided for us, but high school, we had to buy all of our books, materials, high school. Pencils, pens, books. Most of us bought secondhand books.
Did you or your family members have to drop out of school to work?
No.
Who in the family held jobs during the 30s? Doing what? How many hours per day or days per week did you or they work?
Well, all through high school, I supposedly worked for my board. I lived with a family and I helped with the dishes and that was to pay for my board. And my sister did some of that and she worked summers like waiting table up at Lake Dunmore and to help pay for education, clothes. And I did one summer, at least I used to spend an afternoon reading probably from 1 o'clock till 4 o'clock or something like that, reading to an elderly lady who lived next door to us in Clarendon. 95-year-old lady who was bedridden and her sister was taking care of her and she would like to get out and sit on the porch or have some time to herself, so she hired me to come and read to her sister. And the old lady always went to sleep. And then I would bring a book that I could read what I wanted to read, because what I had to read to her was classics, you know, something that I wouldn't select probably at the time. So I would have these cowboy stories or Zane Grey books or something else, and sometimes she'd say, "What are you reading?" She'd wake up and say, "What are you reading?" And I'd say, "Well, I'm reading maybe Riders of the Purple Sage or something like that." And she'd say, "Well, read a little bit of that to me." So then she'd go back off to sleep again. So I did that, and I probably got something like $1.25 a week for doing that, maybe 25 cents for an afternoon. One afternoon I didn't show up, and I went, I've never forgotten it because I had such a guilty conscience about it. I didn't go to read to the old lady because there were some friends of ours going to the swimming pool down in the gorge, the Clarendon Gorge, where we went to go swimming. So I went swimming with the rest of the kids. Of course, I got a terrible lecture from her the next day when I showed up about, you know, doing what you're supposed to do and showing up when you're supposed to. And of course, I felt terribly guilty because we'd been brought up to do what we promised to do. And then when I think about the poor old lady not getting a chance to get out and get away from her sister, you know, who was so sick, that was not a very nice thing to do. See, there's a lot of things you think about that you wouldn't do when you're older, that you do when you're a kid.
Did you or family members have trouble finding a job?
No, I don't remember it being difficult to find jobs then, but you didn't get any pay for it. My mother, when you speak about families, my mother took care of all the sick people in the neighborhood, and when babies were born, she helped deliver the babies. And she also scrubbed paint and did ordinary housework for 30 cents an hour to help out. So.
How were you or they able to find work?
Excuse me, well, I don't remember having any great difficulty doing that. When I got out of high school, I had a job. I had a job before I got out of high school, and then when I was laid off at Ross Hunter's because they went bankrupt, before I worked out my 2 weeks' time, I had another job that Pat got me. So I don't remember we having any difficulty getting work, but the pay was terrible. Of course, you didn't earn very much. Might not be a desirable job either. My brothers helped farmers. My brother Ed especially, he helped one of the farmers nearby and helped take care of milk cows and do farm work. And they both did some of that.
Were wages paid in cash, goods, or scrip?
It was paid in cash or check, I would say.
Was the family self-supporting?
Yes.
Did you help support your family?
No. I did help maybe, well, like I might have taken one of my brothers to the dentist at some time or other, or to a doctor, but not to really help support them.
Was the family a do-it-yourself group? If so, explain. Sewing, carpentry, making toys, etc.
Oh,